So for the past couple weeks, we've been covering nothing but the new stuff. Today though, I actually wanted to return to some of the sandbox changes that occurred with the launch of Lightfall. And believe me guys, some of these changes are big ticket item changes. We're talking complete overhauls for certain exotics, subclass 3.0 synergy, and we have pre and post testing for all of these to just show how potent some of these weapons have become. Oh, and by the way, we plan on doing builds with many of these weapons. Now keep in mind, many of the text on these exotics have not been updated to convey their new effects and traits. So if you happen to be in game looking at these exotics and you're wondering, Cross, why am I not seeing these changes? Listen, it's there, trust me. I don't know why, but these texts have had like a delayed update, and this started like a couple seasons ago. With that being said, let's jump into these weapons, starting with 1,000 voices. Each explosion now applies 10 plus 5 within Ravash's Scorched stacks. Now, pre-Lightfall, obviously there was no 3.0 interaction here, but post-Lightfall, you're actually able to get ignitions with 1,000 voices. Now, it does require Ember of Ashes to get an ignition in one shot. However, if you are not rocking Ember of Ashes, you can still get an ignition in 2 shots. Although I do advise rocking Ember of Ashes, as getting that ignition damage is key. Now, the damage plus ignition does more damage, of course, than what it did previously. And the beautiful thing about ignitions, guys, is you can stun unstoppable champions. So even though 1,000 voices does not have intrinsic anti-champion capabilities, with the ignitions that it can cause, you pretty much have an anti-unstoppable champion weapon with 1k. Now keep in mind, we actually did DPS tests on 1,000 voices. It's not good, but that's because 1,000 voices has an incredibly long charge rate. What it does allow you to do is do decent damage, spark ignitions, synergize with Solar 3.0, and simultaneously it requires no crits. So it's super forgiving. Now moving on to Queenbreaker. Queenbreaker now uses Arc 3.0 blind, and shots chains to multiple nearby enemies. Now the pre-version of Queenbreaker's bow would just blind the target that you hit, but post Lightfall, shots now chain to nearby targets. Now keep in mind guys, this is not jolt. This is just chain lightning damage. It does however blind targets, meaning it can stun unstoppable champions. I know some people might be let down that it doesn't actually jolt, so therefore it doesn't actually counter overload champions, but still the blind is still very nice. And on top of that, you have things like Spark of Brilliance, which can synergize. Now moving on, we have Ruinous Effigy. The transmutation sphere slam now suppresses. This is fantastic. And by the way, Ruinous Effigy, amongst so many other Void Trace rifles, are so good this season, primarily because we have so many artifact mods assisting Void weapons. But the pre-version of Ruinous Effigy, the transmutation sphere actually had a suppression-like effect, but it did not tie into Void 3.0. Post-Lightfall though, you can actually see it proccing Echo of Domineering, meaning it's a real suppression effect here. Now what this really means is that Ruinous Effigy with that slam attack can suppress overload champions. Hot! By the way, we're going to be talking about Void Trace rifles here very soon, including an old Wave Splitter build that just keeps getting nastier. Now moving on to Leviathan's Breath. Leviathan's Breath now applies volatile on perfect draw impact. Listen, we did DPS tests last week and Leviathan's Breath was on our list, and I really was not expecting much. And guys, Leviathan's Breath is actually good. When I say actually good, it's not that far behind the likes of Izanagi and rocket launcher combos. Granted, we were using things like Oathkeeper, but the damage surpassed that of like Xenophage, 1,000 voices, Sleeper Simulant, our linear fusion rifles. I know they got nerfed, but still, I was not expecting Leviathan's Breath to do as well as it did, and that's primarily because of this change. Now, they also increased the damage inside of PvP from 396 to 442, which will allow you to once again one-hit kill supers in PvP, and this is all supers. They also increased damage versus champions by 30%. So guys, I am telling you right now, Leviathan's Breath is meta. It's meta against champions. It's meta for damage. It's got good DPS. It's kind of nutty how good Leviathan's Breath is now. Now, pre-version of Leviathan's Breath, no 3.0 interaction, and it also couldn't kill Guardians in their super. But post-version, it applies volatile on those perfect draw hits. It can also kill Guardians in their super, but keep in mind though, Well of Radiance and Bubbles can actually survive unless volatile is already applied, which requires 2 shots. Not sure why those 2 supers survive. Now, there's been a rescaling of enemy health inside of PvE, so it's kind of hard to tell exactly how much of a difference, if it's actually 30% increase versus champions inside of PvE. We sort of just got to take Bungie's word for it, but no lie guys, it's dealing chunky damage. What you need to have though to make Leviathan's Breath truly work is the exotic catalyst. Like that right there is what really amplifies this exotic. Like it may look like little old Archer's Tempo, but this is Leviathan's Breath Archer's Tempo. It's a much better version than normal Archer's Tempo. By the way, Oath Keepers actually speeds up the draw speed of your bows. This I did not know. It's a passive thing. I'm not not saying you need to go out there and rock Oathkeepers, but if you are rocking, say for instance, like 2 bows, by all means, guys, if you're on Hunter, you might as well take advantage of the faster draw time if you're swapping between both Leviathan's Breath and another bow. And with artifact mods like Bricks from Beyond, Void Weapon Channeling, in Void Surge environments, guys, straight up, I'm gonna be rocking both Leviathan's Breath and Under Your Skin. 2 Void bows, both doing tremendous amounts of damage, proccing Volatile for Under Your Skin, using Leviathan's Breath to also apply Volatile. Seriously, for my hunters out there, this may be your time to break out Oathkeepers. Now, moving on to Sunshot. We actually play with Sunshot through the campaign, and Bungie made the change where the explosion on kill now applies 10 plus 5 scorch stacks. Now, the pre-version of this exploded targets on kills, but no 3.0 interaction. It was still sexy to look at. I loved it. I still remember when they made this change. Sunshot used to not even have this effect, but post Lightfall, the targets now explode and they spread scorch. Now, the amount of scorching is very low though. Honestly, guys, don't expect to get consistent ignitions unless you pair it with another ability. I know we were hoping for a little more here out of Sunshot, but I think the point of this is just for Sunshot to work better with our builds. And overall, this doesn't really crank up the power level of the weapon itself by much. We're gonna mess around with it. Again, Vorpal actually scales Scorch and Ignitions, so there may actually be a play in which you can fast swap to another weapon with Vorpal and scale the Scorch with Ignitions for more explosions. Again, I know I may have lost some of you. Don't worry, we will come back to this. I promise. We're gonna make this work. There's gonna be a sexy build coming very soon. Now, moving on, we have Polaris Lance. Polaris, guys, finally got some love. And I know there's lots of players in here right now that are like, yo, the hell even is this weapon? I've never even seen it. Polaris Lance now applies Scorch on perfect 5th shots. And this is actually 40 plus 20 Scorch stacks instead of just its custom burn. Again, the pre-version of this, there was no 3.0 interaction. You just got solar explosions, which was a big letdown. But the post version, the solar Scorch explosions actually allows you to spread Scorch similar to something like Incandescent, but it doesn't require a kill. This is beautiful in-game content. Like, even though I love Incandescent, when you start messing with meteor ads, you run into a scenario in which you are not getting kills. So therefore, you are not proccing Incandescent nearly as much as you are in lower end content. Literally laying on a high health target, rapidly landing those precision hits, and getting off multiple explosions is going to cause that ignition on that target. And the explosions themselves will easily take out red bars. Now, keep in mind, you can use this to stun unstoppable champions, but again, you're gonna wanna combo some things here because it takes 10 shots to stun an unstoppable champion, which is quite a time sink. Personally, guys, I love where Polaris Lance is. This is one of my favorite scout rifles ever. To see it finally have this synergy is beautiful. Now, Two-Tail Fox. Solar Rocket now applies 60 plus 30 Scorch stacks instead of burn. Also, the new Catalyst adds Jolt, pretty much a whole new rocket. We did DPS tests there with Two-Tail Fox. It's really nice. The main takeaway for Two-Tail, just having one person on your team rocking it is really good because it's applying all of these effects at once. Now, the pre-version of this, you had suppression and you had burn, but no 3.0 synergy. Now, though, you can actually get ignitions, and you can even pair this with an ability to create an ignition. This will also stun unstoppable champions. You also have Jolt and Suppression, which both stun overload champions. The beautiful thing about this rocket launcher is how flexible it is. It is literally the anti-champion rocket launcher. And we actually did testing. It wasn't the DPS number that impressed me the most. It's the fact that for single target damage, Two-Tail Fox beat so many different weapons. The only weapons that really surpassed it was like Deathbringer, and that was having to get like the perfect draw down Deathbringer where you shoot perfectly above the target and then all the oracles track to that single target. Listen, it's hard. Most of the time, those void orbs never go to the same target. The only other rocket launcher that surpassed it in terms of damage from a single shot was Eyes of Tomorrow, but that was with Ordnance being fully procced. So that leaves you Two-Tail Fox. It has the ability to take down so many champions, cause ignitions, deal lots of AoE damage, and synergize with so many different things. Oh, and if you happen to be rocking things like Echo of Domineering, the beautiful thing here is because the rocket launcher is actually landing a suppression, because this fragment will reload your equipped weapon when suppressing a target, this applies to Two-Tail Fox, therefore allowing you to do 2 back-to-back shots. So again, guys, like I mentioned a second ago, you've got artifact perks like Bricks from Beyond, which is constantly providing you heavy ammo when getting void weapon kills. This applies to Two-Tail Fox. Now, we had some questions earlier, even when we were doing some damage testing. Do I have to rock a Solar Surge mod as well as a Void Surge mod in order to buff both my rockets for Two-Tail Fox? No, you only have to rock Void Surge because the game looks at this weapon as a void weapon. But that damage you get from those Surge mods, even if it is void, is still applying to your other rockets. Between Leviathan's Breath, man, and Two-Tail Fox, I am torn this season on what to use in my heavy slot when we get get into Grandmaster Nightfalls. Now, Prometheus Lens added the incandescent perk to the catalyst. Now, the pre-version of Prometheus Lens would scorch targets, but it was not much, to the point where we would just run out of ammo in the magazine before we even saw an ignition. It was terrible. Now, though, incandescence is on the catalyst, allowing each kill to apply 30 scorch to nearby enemies, and it's actually 45 with ashes. This makes it very easy to get those ignitions when you're fighting multiple combatants. There's so many things that Prometheus Lens does right, guys, with its auto reloading functions. As long as you have the ability to get yourself some ammo for this thing, you can constantly lay on the trigger and literally set the world on fire. Now, Grand Overture. I know this exotic was disabled for the raid, but Bungie switched the catalyst to use the arc blind ability. Now, the pre-version of this had no 3.0 interaction, but would still blind targets. Now, though, it uses the arc blind, so it actually synergizes with everything in our arc 3.0 subclass. Even when testing with things like Spark of Brilliance and when killing Carl, the nearby enemies were also blinded. Granted, at the same time, there's a glitch going around where you can swap to other weapons with payload perks to trigger the blind as well, hence why it's been disabled. With that being said, though, blinding on this machine gun with this damage output, beautiful. Now, some surprise changes and no pre-testing on this, but still, we wanted to throw it in here. First up, the Manticore. They added a hipfire reticle element to show current stacks of anti-grav repulsor. There's actually a small green bar by the reticle that matches the bar on the left side of your screen, indicating how much charge that you have. Such a nice touch. Also, the fourth Horseman fixed an issue where this weapon had received an unintended 20% damage nerf. Now, it's difficult to track damage numbers across light level changes between each expansion, but this deals about half of Carl's health bar in a single mag. Now, keep in mind, we've been doing damage testing across the board season to season. We've used fourth Horseman in the past, and it's always been doing high DPS. I'm not really sure where that 20% damage nerf is being applied to. Was that against champions or was that against bosses? I'm not sure. I will say, though, we did damage testing the other day with shotguns, and fourth Horseman still puts out. Granted, you literally have to blow your entire load to pull off these incredible damage values. Whereas the new shotgun, which is one of my favorite weapons in the game, Conditional Finality, check out our damage test and our review for that one. Even though that gun may not have the best DPS, its total damage is fantastic. It's also like the ultimate anti-champion weapon with its freezing and ignition capabilities. Now, last but not least, Thunderlord fixed an issue where this weapon's lightning strikes could disrupt you or your teammates. I think the main takeaway about Thunderlord is Bungie actually gave us an exotic catalyst, which will actually auto-reload the weapon or portions of the weapon when those lightning strikes hit. No lie, people have actually been using Thunderlord against Nezarec in the raid with some pretty good success. Thunderlord plus Actium War Rig plus the exotic catalyst, you could pretty much lay on the trigger until you run out of ammo. So guys, those are your pre and post testing for all the different changes to our exotics. Let me know in the comments below if we missed anything. We've got some builds coming your way that are going to be utilizing the changes that you see here. And if you enjoy this video, a like is very much appreciated. A lot of work has been put into this. Big shout out to the editing team. Lots of testing on this one. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.